My name is Kelly Palmer, and I'm the Chief Learning Officer of Degreed. I actually spent the last 4 years of my career at LinkedIn as the Chief Learning Officer at LinkedIn, and I spent several years at Sun Microsystems and Yahoo also running learning organizations. But the truth is I haven't always been in learning. In fact, I spent many years of my career in product development and corporate strategy, and although I was successful, there came a point in my career where I just wasn't happy. And I had to take a step back and ask myself, what really makes me passionate about what I do? So I found that learning was that answer for me. And why? I really believe that learning has the power to transform lives and change the world. So about 10 years ago, I completely changed my career. And my story is not unique. I wanted to introduce you to my son, Cameron. This is Cameron in kindergarten, graduated from high school, and now he's at the University of Oregon. And his journey was very similar. He got into school and he picked a major, and he wasn't really happy at what he was studying, which kind of broke my heart. I really wanted him to have an amazing learning experience at school, and I encouraged him to really try to explore what made him happy, what he was passionate about. And so about 1.5 years ago, he actually changed his major, and he's really happy. And the thing is that Cameron is future talent, and a lot of the future talent that's coming into the workforce is asking for purpose and passion in their work and in their lives, and it's something that we need to pay attention to. And I really think that purpose and passion has a great part in really helping people think about talent in the workforce. And as we all know, there's a huge war for talent going on in the industry. And I don't care whether you're in Silicon Valley at one of the tech companies or you're in industry, people are fighting for talent. And so we have to figure out how to best develop our talent and how to keep them happy at work. So the idea around happiness at work is really, I think, around engagement. And what is engagement exactly? Well, engagement is the personal investment a person brings to their work with them every day. And I'll tell you, you can feel it when people are engaged at work. They're happy, they're proud of the work that they're doing, and you can feel it in the atmosphere. And that's not only great for employees, but that's great for the company too. So how do you create engagement at your company? I think there's actually a recipe for creating engagement at your company, and it has 3 parts. The first part is building a strong company culture, and of course where learning is a huge part of that company culture. Second is to invest in career transformation. And that means that you're telling your employees when they come into your company that we're really going to invest in you and your development and developing skills not only for today, but for the future. And then the third thing is actually providing them the learning opportunities and the experiences and opportunities that they need in order to be successful. And as learning professionals, I think what's really important for us to realize is that learning can be the center of a strategy around this, and it can be your biggest competitive advantage. Oftentimes we don't see learning in that way, and I think it's time to think differently about learning and realize that if you think about learning differently, learning can be your biggest competitive advantage. The problem is that most companies don't do learning. They actually do training. And there's a big difference between learning and training. Training is what we've been doing, I think, a lot in the business world, where it's very business-centric, it's top-down, it's about control, and it's about telling people what they need to learn and how they need to learn it, versus learning, which is very transformational. And it's about being more learner-centric, putting the learner in control of their learning. It's about being experiential and actually about individuality and about freedom. And there's a great quote from Daniel Pink in his book called Drive, where he talks about the need for people, for humans to be motivated. They really need to feel like they have control and autonomy over their own lives and what they're responsible for. And that means they're learning as well. So this is a picture of a typical lecture hall in a university where probably a lot of the classes that my son Cameron's taking right now. And unfortunately, we've taken that antiquated model of the university lecture system where you have professors lecturing and then students listening, taking in that knowledge and taking tests. That's very transactional. And frankly, it's not very inspiring, but learning is actually very transformational. Let me give you an example of that. I introduced you to Cameron a little while ago, and Cameron had an opportunity to do a summer internship last summer. He was going to do a social media and marketing plan for a company in Silicon Valley, and he said he wasn't sure if he could actually take the internship because he hadn't learned in school yet the skills that he needed to be successful doing that internship. But luckily his university provided content online, a lynda.com library, and he also did some searches on the internet to find other resources that he needed, and he actually took a course on how to rock social media, how to create a marketing plan. He also did some other research, and guess what? He was able to actually do real work for a real company, and then actually put that experience on his resume and his LinkedIn profile so he could go get a job when he graduates. Now that's transformational. That means you're learning things to actually do real things, and that's the big difference. We also know that traditional training doesn't work. A lot of you might have seen the data around this, but I think I was blown away when I saw that $160 billion a year is spent on training programs right now, and that's just in the US. And people are not satisfied with these learning programs that we're spending so much money on. In addition to that, it's not how people learn in this traditional model. 80% is said to be forgotten within 30 days if you're just lecturing to someone, and less than 15% of that is actually able to be applied on the job. So clearly we need to think about doing learning differently. Clearly there's something that's not quite right. And as we think about our workforce and our changing workforce and how often people change jobs, people don't stay with one company for their whole careers anymore. For millennials, the average is 2 to 3 years, and for others, it's maybe 4 to 5 years. But it's not that you can go to school once and have the education that you need for your whole career anymore. People need to be learning all the time, and they are learning all the time. We know how millennials are learning, and a lot of us learn like that too. But if you take a moment and say, how do you actually learn every day in your job or at home? Most people, the first thing that they do is they'll do a search. They'll do a Google search on something that they want to know. The second thing they do is ask somebody that's right next to them, the answer to the question. So what's interesting is if we know that this is how people learn, why are we not in the corporate world thinking more about making how people learn on the job in their lives every day easier? And I think that that's the key question to ask here. I would propose that the model that we look at is more like 80% of what people are learning, actually more than 80% of what people are learning is outside of work, but we can bring some of that 80% in, but that 80% could be self-directed learning, more of the collaborative, online, on demand, and independent, whereas 20% could be more in person. Now, I don't want people to get the wrong idea. I'm not saying that in-person training is not valuable. In fact, I think it's incredibly valuable. I just don't think classroom lecture-based training is really great. So if instead, the reason people like to get together is because they want to collaborate with cohorts. They want to do problem solving and build skills. So have this combination where you can do both of those things, and I think that can be very powerful because we know our research at Degreed has shown us that people are actually spending a lot of time outside of work learning, and they're even spending their own money on learning, which is quite amazing, quite a bit of money every year on their own training, on their own learning. So I think that, again, we have this amazing opportunity in the learning field to actually think about learning differently, to make it our biggest competitive advantage when we hire people, when we engage our talent, and when we develop them, to have learning be what people think as a benefit, that we will invest in your learning and help you get the skills that you need. The interesting thing about that, especially with CLOs in the industry, is this is a different model. It's a little bit scary for people. It means that instead of this control model, we actually think about how we have to inspire people rather than control them. And that's different for CLOs, and it's different for the industry. And so we have to think about that. But the interesting thing is that I don't think we ever really did have control, and technology is making new things possible. If you just think about employer brand, for example, no longer does a PR department have the ability to spin an employer brand message anymore. Your employer brand comes from your employees. And if an employee is going to take a job at a new company, guess where they look? They go to Glassdoor and find out how your company is rated, what your company culture is like, or they go on LinkedIn, or for a number of other social media outlets, they find out about the company way before they join. And guess what? It's your employees that are saying either good or bad things about it. So realize we don't have that control anymore. And as we think about learning, we need to know that we don't have that control, and that our employees have a really powerful voice in that. Technology and analytics are making new things possible, and you can see that. So I'm going to talk a little bit next about how technology is making new things possible, and that we don't want to be left behind in terms of an L&D community about how we think about using technology to think about learning differently and to take strides forward in this movement of this real paradigm shift that's going on in learning. So I mentioned to you that I joined Degreed recently, and there's a couple of reasons that I joined Degreed. First of all, when you get back to purpose and passion, the mission for Degreed is about making all learning matter and being able to discover and track and make all learning count. And that really resonated with me. Also, the culture and values of the company is amazing, and learning is one of the biggest things that we think about being a learning company, and making sure that we're investing in our employees and that we're continually learning all the time, every day. It's something that really drew me to Degreed. But the other thing that drew me to Degreed is that over time, I've been at Sun and Yahoo and LinkedIn, and the evolution of where technology has gone from each of those companies over time, things keep improving and evolving. But it wasn't until I saw what Degreed was doing that I realized that this is it. There's something there that nobody else is doing, and it's about creating a learning ecosystem, and that it's not about just one thing. It's not just about your content, and it's not just about your LMS. There's tons of content out there, and learners are overwhelmed basically with what they've got going. So this idea that learning happens every place all the time, and that we can bring all of these components together to make learning matter is really a key there. So some of the things that I think people need to think about when they are putting together a learning strategy is, how does the technology component actually fit into that? And I think curated content and personalized content is a huge part of that. Because learners are so overwhelmed with content, being able to use pathways to curate content, and this means that it doesn't have to be content that you're creating yourself, although there is a place for content to be created that's specific to your own company. But other than that, you probably don't have to create your own content. You can actually use content that's out there from suppliers like Lynda and Skillsoft and Safari and Khan Academy, edX, Coursera, but then also all the free content that's out there. And then think about personalizing content. That's another huge advantage to the learning ecosystem, because people want a personalized learning experience. They don't want the one-to-many any longer. Creating a learning culture is something that's really important, and one of the things I think that's important to do is to create learning as a habit every day. So serving up curated content to people based on their interests, creating playlists and personal recommendations, and being able to interact with groups and discussion boards, and actually leave takeaways when you actually consume the content, so you can reflect on what you're learning. Those are some of the key things that I think are incredibly important to creating that learning culture, really embedding learning into people's work every day. And then, of course, the holy grail in learning is being able to think about tracking everything that you're learning, because in the past, an LMS system would only track that compliance training or the corporate training that you might get. But we know that if people are learning all the time, every day, that there's so much more out there that you can be tracking. So imagine this personalized learning profile where you can track everything, that regardless of company, so it goes with you everywhere. And that you can track what you've learned at your company. You can track podcasts, articles you've read, books you've read, and it goes with you everywhere. And then you can find mentors and share expertise along with that. It's just a very powerful model. I think that the other thing I want to make sure people realize is that learning is really powerful when you put it in the context of your career goals, because people want to build skills, whether or not you're a new college grad and just entering the workforce, whether you got a new job and want to build skills to make you better at that job, or whether you're thinking about the skills that you need to build for your dream job of the future. If you think about those career goals and then map learning to those career goals through pathways, it's very, very powerful. And then you have a way of looking at your learning. And so also, thinking about how people learn every day and being able to use big data and insights into how learners are learning is the way of the future. It's no longer really things are moving way too fast to use old models of measuring learning. We have to look at the entire learning ecosystem and analyze that rather than the small piece that we have been learning. I wanted to share with you just briefly what we're doing at Degreed in terms of using our own product inside. So we've got our employees and we're investing in them and we want them to be using learning every day. So we've created a top 20 leaderboard to try to help some healthy competition to help people realize that learning can be fun and you can get points and you can get on the leaderboard every week, and it's really been a fun experience with our employees at Degreed. The other thing that we're doing is we're actually giving every employee $100 a month towards whatever learning that they want to do, and we do this through a program called FlexEd. FlexEd allows you on the Degreed platform to offer your employees this amount of money, and then you can actually track and measure it, but it also shows your employees that you're actually investing in them and their future. And we're also doing quality culture pulses to make sure that we're delivering on our employee brand promise that we're going to invest in our employees and we care about their skill and career development. So to recap, engagement is really an important part of creating happiness at work, and I think that there's a great recipe for engagement. So first, it's about building a strong learning culture and making sure that people know that you want to, second, invest in their career transformation, not only for today, but for their skills of the future. And then third, you need to provide the learning and the opportunities for people to be successful at your company and in life. And I'm going to leave you with this last quote, which is from the Buddha. And he says, and I love this, your purpose in life is to find your purpose and to give your whole heart and soul to it. So with that, I'll leave it there. And if you'd like to contact me later, you can reach me at kelly@degreed.com. Thank you.